Star Trek The Original Series, Season 1, Episode 18, Arena. I think most people know this one. It's the iconic Gorn episode. Kirk versus a guy in an alligator suit with a romper that has a turtleneck collar. Doesn't look very threatening, but I assure you, it is. This is very scary stuff right here. And in one of my first videos ever, it was a very short 2-minute video of just me sort of making fun of the fight scene between Kirk and the Gorn in this episode. It was goofy, and goofy is my bread and butter, but I thought it would be fun to do a full video on the entire episode, because it's one of my favorites. And I think we should just get right into it. The episode opens up with the Enterprise getting invited to a Federation colony on a planet called Cestus III. Kirk, Spock, McCoy, and 3 no-names beam down, and they discover that the colony has been destroyed. Now, you'd think that they would have scanned the planet's surface beforehand, and you'd also think that would have revealed that the colony had been destroyed, but apparently not, and we just have to accept that. And they come across a survivor who's badly injured, and they need to get him out of there. Spock does a tricorder scan, and he says there are creatures on this planet, not human, and cold-blooded. Very scary. Although I don't know how he can be sure, because sometimes when Spock uses his tricorder in this episode, he's holding it backwards and not even looking at the little TV screen. But whatever. The red shirt among the group decides to take a look at the horizon, and that's all he had to do to get himself killed. He somehow gets vaporized, which is weird because the ensuing attack seems to be artillery strikes of some kind. They're dropping bombs all around them. But they somehow zeroed in on this red shirt and sniped his ass with some kind of vaporizer. And the rest of them take cover. Kirk calls the Enterprise and tells them to beam him up. But Sulu says they can't. They had to put the shields up because they're under attack by an enemy vessel. And I believe this is the first episode of Star Trek that establishes that you can't beam through shields. Although, in the early days of Star Trek, they called them screens, not shields. And some silliness happens. Kirk avoids the artillery strikes, dodging them like a true action hero. They're basically playing whack-a-mole, and Kirk is the mole. And I don't understand how they can be so inaccurate and accurate at the same time. They can't seem to hit anyone with these bombs, but they somehow sniped that red shirt, and they were also able to lock onto Spock's tricorder and cause it to explode somehow. He throws it away just in time. Just seems a little wacky to me, but whatever. Kirk finds some kind of cannon. Cannons will be kind of a bit of a theme in this episode, as we'll soon see. And he launches what looks like a billiards ball at them. And when I say at them, I mean in their general direction, because we never actually see anyone firing any kind of weapons at them. And it blows them up. Seems like the people of this colony should have just used that little cannon that launches, jawbreaker candies or whatever the fuck these things are. Would have solved a lot of their problems. And they seem safe for now. The ship in orbit is bugging out, and the Enterprise beams everybody up. And as they're following the enemy ship, Kirk decides to ask the lone survivor of the colony some questions. Kirk tells them that they received messages from Cestus III inviting them to come. And the survivor says they never sent any message. So the Gorn, this is the Gorn by the way, have somehow managed to fabricate Starfleet messages and impersonate Starfleet personnel. I don't really know how that's possible, but they obviously did it to lure the Enterprise there so they could destroy them. You might say it was a trap. And Kirk is pretty outraged by this. He thinks it's a prelude to a full-scale invasion of the Federation. I mean, I know it was pretty brutal, but that seems a little premature. And Spock tries to counsel restraint by saying that there's several possible explanations other than an invasion, but Kirk's not having it. And the entire colony was massacred, and he believes that the aliens are intent on going to war with the Federation. Spock says if that's the case, they have to make sure that the enemy vessel never reaches its home base, wherever the fuck that is. Although, it seems as though Spock believes there are, there's much more to the story than what Kirk is suggesting, which of course is true. And Kirk is very hawkish in this episode. He seems intent on destroying the enemy ship as really nothing more than a show of force. He thinks it will deter them from ever attacking the Federation again. Because that always works, right? Spock says they should at least have some regard for sentient life. And Kirk says there's no time for that. He says this far out, we're the only policemen around, and a crime has been committed. I do love this episode, but that seems really out of character for Kirk. I get that he's angry, and I get that he's pissed off and he wants to do something about it. But he should want some answers more than revenge. And it seems like he only wants revenge. Something about this doesn't sit right with me. Kirk is definitely making renegade choices at this point. And in my last video about Kirk, I said that he wasn't like this. So maybe I was wrong. But I think this is an exception to the rule. I think most times he's not like this. And while they're in pursuit and closing on the Gorn ship, it comes to a dead stop for seemingly no reason. Kirk doesn't really question it. He sees this as a stroke of luck, and he's preparing to fire on them once they're in range. And as I said, this seems very un-Kirk-like to me. Is he really just going to destroy a ship that is sitting dead in space? I mean, he should definitely try to take prisoners, right? And question them, find out why the fuck they blew up a whole colony full of people? Wouldn't that make more sense? But thankfully, he doesn't blow them up, because just as they're approaching and they're about to strike, the Enterprise gets hit with something, and they rapidly reduce speed, and they come to a dead stop, just like the Gorn ship. And it's at this point, a glowing tie-dye t-shirt comes on the screen, and it starts talking to them. They've been stopped by a group of omnipotent beings that call themselves the Metrons. So here we go again with the omnipotent space beings. They encounter them every other week on the original series. It's fucking crazy. And the Metrons say the Enterprise and the Gorn ship have entered their space intending to commit violence. And they can't allow that. They say they will resolve the conflict between the Federation and the Gorn in a way most suited for their limited mentalities. The Metrons plan to take Kirk and the captain of the Gorn ship to a neutral planet, and they're going to settle their dispute in a fight to the death. And the winner goes free, the loser obviously dies, and their ship will be destroyed by the Metrons. Captain Kirk disappears from the bridge, and Uhura lets out a blood-curdling scream for some reason. I mean, get a hold of yourself. They said that this was going to happen, so I don't know why she's so surprised. And Kirk appears on the planet, which looks suspiciously like Vasquez Rocks in northern Los Angeles. And the Gorn is finally revealed. Are you scared? I mean, look at this. Look how mean he is. If only Dr. Alan Grant could see this. And the first thing the Gorn does is grab a stick, which is always the mark of a skilled and deadly opponent. And they begin to fight. And I'm using the word fight pretty loosely. I admit that it is not exactly Bruce Lee and Chuck Norris. But to me personally, it's better. It is, however, very slow. And Kirk Fu is doing no damage. And then they lock up for a minute, and it looks like they might kiss. Which is really sweet, I think. The Gorn is just a sweet dinosaur boy. But Kirk decides that he's going to spurn the advances, and he throws a big rock at the Gorn for minimal damage. And the Gorn is like, well, two can play at this game, motherfucker. And he picks up a giant rock and heaves it at Kirk, Killer Croc style. And Kirk decides that he's just going to get the fuck out of here. Wise decision. And Kirk takes out this little electric razor-looking thing that the Metrons gave him. He thinks it's a recording device for a personal log, but it's not. It's actually a translator that allows the Gorn to hear and understand what he's saying, and vice versa. And as he's recording this log that isn't a log, Kirk says that the Gorn has withstood attacks from him that would have killed a human being. And I always laugh at that line because all he really did was do some karate chops and kick him a bit, and he threw a rock at him. I mean, I guess the rock could have killed a human being, but, fair enough. But I just love the idea that Kirk thinks his kicks and karate chops and slaps are enough to kill most people. And in most episodes, it's kind of true, but not this one. Also, Kirk is wearing shoes that are a little different in this episode. They are not the typical heeled, pointy Starfleet boot. They're like flat, like sneakers with laces, probably because of the terrain that Shatner has to deal with. And Kirk climbs to the top of this little mountain, and he notices the Gorn down below. And he decides to push this massive, conveniently placed boulder off the mountain, and it nails the Gorn. I mean, I don't even know how the fuck he moved this thing at all. It's fucking massive. I mean, those dudes in those strongman competitions can barely move rocks half the size of this fucking thing. I mean, look at this guy. That rock is nowhere near the size of the one Kirk moved, and it looks like his head is about to be shot out of his fucking asshole right now. What are you doing? This is not healthy. And I'm starting to notice that a lot of this episode is just big rocks being thrown around. That is like half the episode. And we're not done with rocks because the Gorn obviously isn't dead. He gets up from getting hit with this boulder that just fell off a cliff onto him like it was nothing. And he chases Kirk, and Kirk falls into a trap set by the Gorn. And what's the trap? You guessed it. It's a fucking rock. A fucking rock falls on Kirk and pins him down. He's stuck. The Gorn approaches him, and he's about to stab him with this little spiked dildo he's got. And just before he does, he inexplicably moves the boulder out of the way so Kirk can escape. Thanks, Gorn. Thanks for being smart enough to set a trap, but too stupid for anything else. And now Kirk is on the run, limping now because of the massive rock that fell on him. I mean, his legs should have been crushed beyond recognition, but they're not. Maybe boulders on this planet are just lighter for some reason? I don't know. And while this is going on, the Metrons are allowing the Enterprise bridge crew to observe what's going on the planet via the view screen. And they see Kirk stumble upon some potassium nitrate, which somehow Spock identifies just by seeing it. He's a really brilliant scientist, I guess that's the only explanation for that. And it seems like Kirk has an idea. But he's got to go scavenging in order for it to work. And before he can find all the stuff he thinks he needs, the Gorn contacts him with the device that Kirk thought was a personal recorder. And he asks Kirk to stop running. He's tired of chasing him, apparently. He also explains that the colony on Cestus III was attacked because it's in Gorn space. So, for the first time, Kirk is considering the possibility that there are two sides to this story. But there's no time to worry about that now. Kirk has to get moving. He finds a fucking bamboo stick along with the potassium nitrate, and he finds sulfur, coal, and diamonds. So yes, Kirk is building a cannon that fires diamonds out of bamboo. That's what's happening right now. And it magically works. Don't question it. Okay, just don't do it. It will melt your brain if you do. He fires this makeshift cannon at the Gorn, and it wounds him. He's down for the count. And Kirk picks up the Gorn's spiked dildo, and he's about to finish him off. But he has a change of heart.
No, I won't kill you. Maybe you thought you were protecting yourself when you attacked the outpost. No, I won't kill him. Do you hear? You'll have to get your entertainment someplace else.
And a Metron shows up. And it looks like a young Caesar or some shit. And the Metron is surprised and impressed that Kirk showed mercy and spared the Gorn, and praises him for doing so. And Kirk asks that the Gorn captain and his ship be spared. The Metron is pleased by this and says that in a few centuries, maybe humans will stop being so savage and get their shit together, which is very high praise from a group of beings that were clearly entertaining themselves by having Kirk fight the Gorn. Seems pretty clear that this was a prize fight disguised as some kind of lesson, but whatever. It's a nice message. And Kirk is sent back to the Enterprise, and it's a happy ending. And we don't see the Gorn show up again in live-action Star Trek for almost 40 years, until Enterprise, which is kind of laughable, but okay. And yeah, it's a great episode. The Gorn, despite its cheap look, is iconic, and I love the Gorn. He's a sweet lizard boy. And, I don't love how irrationally aggressive Kirk is at the start of this episode, but I like to imagine he learned a bit of a lesson here, going forward, at least for enemies other than Klingons. He won't learn to tolerate them for some time yet. But anyway, let me know what you thought of this episode. That's all I got for now. My next video will most likely be a Next Generation commentary, so if you're not super into TOS, you can keep an eye out for that. Then again, if you're not super into TOS, you're probably not watching this right now. But whatever. Yeah. And until next time, take it easy.